I'm a big softie, I'm a romantic, definitely. I like feeling a lot in a film. I like to cry. I like to laugh. If I have a style, I would just...
Michaël Dudok De Wit is an independent animator from Netherlands. He is known for his Oscar-winning short Father and Daughter and nominated works like Monk and the Fish and The Red Turtle. But the most fascinating thing about him is probably the fact that he is the first and only non-Japanese director to work with the animation giants Studio Ghibli. As the story goes, the studio themselves contacted him out of the blue, asking if he wanted to direct a film. So, what is it about his work that made him so unique, leading to such a unique collaboration? Broadly speaking, a deductive film has three main features. 1. It explores what you'd call beauty. Every artist wants to make beautiful images. For deductive it's his main motivation. He doesn't make films just for fun. Of course, he finds animation fun, but one of his main motivations is to make something beautiful, or to express his idea of beauty, or to explore the meaning itself. And you see this in every aspect of his work, whether it's backgrounds, smooth flowing animation. He also often talks about his love for the line, and it is also one of the first things you notice in his work. In Monk and the Fish, he uses hand drawn brush strokes, thick in some places, thin in the others, and it has a very human quality, and it is all very deliberate. Similarly, in Father and Daughter and The Red Turtle, he uses bold outlines. This love for the line was inspired by brushstrokes from Japanese Buddhist monks and Chinese political comics. He was attracted to them because they were extremely simple, mature, spontaneous, and fresh. Later, he was also inspired by the style of Sylvain Romain. He also makes use of implied lines, which influences the staging a lot. For example, in Red Turtle, there is a bamboo forest, something he chose because it has simple vertical lines. No flowers, no birds. And in his films, there's also movement and compositions. For example, in Father and Daughter, you have one composition that has an angled line, the next one has a diagonal line, and then a horizontal line. 2. Timelessness or a timeless appeal. In many of Dudok De Wit's interviews, he talks about timelessness in his work. By this, he refers to two things. One is with regards to the experience of time itself. Sometimes it's linear, it starts at one point and ends at another point. Like in Monk and the Fish, it starts with an attempt to catch a fish and ends with floating into the sky. The other times it's circular, like in Father and Daughter, it begins and ends with father and daughter meeting each other. And then sometimes time is infinite or forever. There are moments where you feel that time has no beginning or an end, making it paradoxically non existent or still. And by stillness, it doesn't mean freezing of a frame, but what he calls visual silence. You see this quality of time expressed abundantly through nature. For example, birds flying in the sky or clouds simply hanging above the horizon. The other meaning of timelessness is a certain subtlety in his work. He compares it to poetry, where meanings are conveyed through very little information and with aesthetic and rhythmic qualities.
You know, Sarah,
What?
I love talking to you.
all of his work, there are no dialogues, so all the acting choices are in the form of body language. And Dudok De Wit says that he loves showing emotions through body language and behavior. When you watch his films, you understand how you can express anger in a few moments, or how you can express grief, guilt, empathy, and forgiveness all in a few seconds without saying a single word. He also says that he prefers this over facial expressions because the face is extremely complicated. It gives too much information and requires a lot of skill to execute. So in his films, you find very few close-ups and many long shots. While talking about Red Turtle, he says that he watched a lot of modern dance for inspiration, where he could sit far away and still be moved to tears. Sometimes limiting information this way gives a sense of mystery. So you see a lot of dream sequences in his work, which often blends into reality. It requires a certain amount of what Samuel Taylor Coleridge called a willing suspension of disbelief when he watches films. In other words, he tells the audience, "Here's my story, let me carry you into it." And finally, story. Dudok De Wit places huge amount of importance on the story. He says that he needs to be completely obsessed and very passionate about the story he wants to tell. Proof of this fact is in the number of films he has made so far. In over 20 years, he has made 3 short films and 1 feature film. This is not including his commercial work. In many of his interviews, he talks about the role of intuition in his process of ideation. When he gets an idea, it should feel right. Otherwise, he moves on to the next one, and later he comes back and looks at it rationally. Or in other words, he begins to question it. While writing the story for Red Turtle, the producers of Studio Ghibli sent to Dr. Witt a copy of the book called Quaidan, which is a collection of fairy tales that talk about the relationship between humans and nature. You can see this theme feature predominantly in the Red Turtle. The story for the monk and the fish was inspired by 10 ox herding pictures, which is a series of images and short poems that represent a practitioner's progression towards enlightenment. But sometimes music is the inspiration for his story. In fact, he even says that in all of his short films, music came to him at the same time as the story. He calls it the driving force, and sometimes it even dictates the timing of this animation. Like his stories, there's so much thought goes into sound. For example, in The Red Turtle, there are no dialogues, but you still hear the characters through maybe a cough, or a laugh, or even heavy breathing. There's so much thought that goes into this that he even had separate actors record sounds of breathing for each character. But what does Dr. Witt really want to say through his work? In my opinion, he doesn't really want to say anything, at least not things that can be put into words. What he wants instead is the audience to feel, not what he feels, but what they already feel. He reduces his films to something very basic, like the feeling of longing or a love for nature, things that everyone feels at some point in their lives, in some form or the other. So when people watch his films, they inevitably attach it to their own experiences, making them think about their own selves, their own lives, even if they aren't really able to follow the story. I think this could be said for most of the other Studio Ghibli films as well.